This is In Character. I'm your host, Gerard Robinson, Vice President for Education at the Advanced Studies in Culture Foundation.
Well, we are in for a treat for this one because we actually have administrators, and they play a very important role in not only the leadership for the school, but also establishing the culture. As many of you know, the foundation where I work was created 25 years ago. Dr. James Hunter is the founder. He is a professor of religion and social thought and sociology at the University of Virginia. And through his research, we've identified how important schools are to the formation of young people and the roles that adults and institutions play. Well, there are very few public institutions in the United States that matter more than schools. And who matters in those places? We're talking about administrators. So what we're going to do today is have a conversation with some of them. And what we're going to do is just to start off with each person. They'll tell you their name, affiliation, where they're located, and then we'll go into the question area. Because I know Sharif, I'm going to go ahead and pick on him first, and then we'll go from there.
All right. Well, thank you, Gerard. It's great to be here, not only with you, but the rest of these administrators. My name is Sharif El-Mekki. I am from Philadelphia, and I recently retired from 17 years as a school administrator, the last 16 being a principal, and the last 11 at the very same school that was close to my home. So I had the honor of being a principal in my neighborhood school.
Thank you. Jeff, you've got the official looking backgrounds. Let's go to you.
I'm Jeff Charbonneau. I'm a principal at Zillah Middle School in Zillah, Washington State. Kind of like Sharif, I spent 17 years as a classroom teacher at Zillah High School after having graduated from Zillah High School I won't say when, but a little while ago. So I spent 17 years as a high school teacher, and then this is my third year at the middle school. But again, in the same town that I went to school in, and just absolutely loving it.
Thank you. We'll turn it over to Amanda.
Hey everyone, I'm Amanda Miliner. I am in Georgia, and I serve as assistant principal. And before that, I taught elementary school and served as an instructional coach. And I also lead and teach in the same area that I graduated high school, which is pretty great because I'm a military brat. So I actually was in an area long enough to actually be able to call somewhere home. So yes, this is my fourth year in administration because I coached before that.
All right, good to have someone from Georgia on the phone. Lindsey.
Hi, everyone. So I feel like I'm kind of the enigma to this conversation. I'm in my very first year in administration, and I just love you, Jeff. I miss you. Jeff was a mentor. I was the 2018 Illinois Teacher of the Year and was not planning on leaving my classroom. And in the last year, I had some leadership in my building that wanted me to take on some leadership roles at the high school level. So I am in my first year as the academic dean at Dwight Township High School, where I serve in a hybrid role as the academic dean, and I also continue to teach half the day 12th grade English.
Well, congratulations, and every leader had a first year, so yeah. Welcome to it. Let's go over to Jennifer.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Walker. I'm the 2010 Teacher of the Year, and I am the Deputy Chief of Core Curriculum for an urban district, Youngstown City Schools, which is in Northeast Ohio. I was a teacher in the district for 16 years, then left for a couple of years to become an administrator, and came back as a building principal, and now work at the district level, and am very excited to be with everyone tonight.
Thank you. My wife's family's from Ohio, so
everyone great is from Ohio. Unfortunately, they all leave. That's the only thing.
Let's go to Derek.
Hi guys, Derek Voiles. I'm an assistant principal at Lincoln Heights Middle School in Morristown, Tennessee. I'm in my second year of being an assistant principal, and before that, or prior to that, I taught 10 years of English in the same school that I'm now moved up to be an assistant principal. So pretty cool, full circle, getting to work with teachers I've got to work with for the past 10 years.
Amongst the many things that all of you have in common is that most principals, in fact, were classroom teachers, different levels, elementary, middle, or high. So my first question is, what's the pathway that led you to leadership? I've got a number of friends who are principals today, and they said, I wanted to become a principal because of X. Some say Y. What do you say? Let's start with my friend from Georgia, Amanda, and particularly be interested to hear your story because I know a few things about your background, but also the military side. So how did all of this play into your decision?
Well, I'll first start by saying I was very happy teaching. I love teaching. And so when I became an instructional coach, my principal asked me to do that. So that kind of gave me a level up on leadership. I miss teaching, but then I love teaching the teachers. So when administration came forward and they asked me about that, I was like, I don't know. People always tell me that if all the good teachers leave the classroom, who's going to teach our kids? And then my building principal said, but if all the good teachers stay in the classroom, who's going to lead the building? And I was like, oh, well, hold up now. So then I thought about it too, because I thought some of the people that I thought might be interviewing, I was like, man, I don't know. I think I might want to interview then because I want to make sure the person that comes in here really loves these kids, has the purpose, and is really going to do the job that our person that's leaving has done, and they're going to continue that legacy. So I'm a big person of prayer, and I think that played a part, and it just happened to work out, and so I've been doing it. To answer your question about my background, I think my military background honestly has afforded me so many opportunities of just being flexible and adaptable. Because as an administrator, as we all know, you have a great list of things to do that day and you do none of them. And you literally spend the day, like today I spent part of my day in nap time in pre-K, helping one of my friends fall asleep. I spent some of my time with a teacher helping her with data. I mean, you don't get your to-do list. But I love what I do. And I think I love it because my military background allowed me the ability to appreciate the moment and to be okay with not having control. And I think you have to have that as an administrator. So I'm definitely not perfect in any means, but I think I'm very open to learning. I appreciate diversity and I appreciate the new opportunities that come. And I think you need that as a building level, or you get burned out really quickly. So you have to find the positive and you have to appreciate those small moments.
So it sounds like you are in school. Tell me what it's like either at your school or your district. Is it hybrid, mixed, or all in?
We are in school full-time brick and mortar. We do have an option where parents could opt to do digital learning if they wanted to. So we do have, like in my school, for example, every grade level has one digital teacher because I had enough people to create a cohort for them to have enough distant learning students. I love it. I really do love it. I'm glad we're back. The kids are so glad to be back. And the kids were really, really great with all the things we have in place to keep them safe. They were better with it than the adults. A lot of times I would say, man, look at they don't complain about their masks. They don't complain about being 6 feet apart. We have partitions up, they're in desk, but they're just so glad to be there. And you can already see the gap when you look at the data. You can already see this gap instructionally of what they've lost. And so I'm glad they're back and I'm glad the parents are comfortable with that. And I'm also glad we have that option because I don't want our high risk students being forced into that. So I'm glad we have that online option, but it's really been, knock on wood, it's been a very positive situation in a crazy, unprecedented situation of times, so it's been nice.
Absolutely. Jennifer, talk to us about Youngstown and what you're doing, your pathway.
So Youngstown City Schools is unique in that it was the first school district in Ohio to be taken over by the state. We are a struggling school district. We have the highest percentage of poverty among school districts in the state, as well as one of the highest crime rates in our area. And so my passion was being a teacher for our scholars in the city schools. And I never thought, like Lindsey, I never thought I would leave my classroom. But it was, it was a challenge when the state came and took over our school district, and we had some, as part of the turnaround model, we lost some of our administrators who I knew had worked really hard to support our teachers and support our students. And an opportunity came up for me to work with teachers for our county, our educational service center. And I always joke that it was the hardest decision I've ever made to leave my classroom. Harder than choosing to marry my husband or have children. It was the most difficult decision. And so I got to move away from the district a little bit to hone my administrator skills and grow my skills. and then was fortunate enough to come back to the district as a principal. And one of the things that I love is that I have that experience of being a teacher in the district. I understand the challenges that our teachers have, the barriers that our students face. We still are under the control of the governor. So we have our second CEO in place. So that just means that we have an academic distress commission and a CEO who controls the school district. And actually, it's been really amazing. The support that we have from the state level is really incredible. And it does create a fear factor, which is challenging for all of us. But we are just so fortunate to have the support of everyone. And we're really seeing some great gains in our data. We've introduced some the science of reading and some new theoretical practices in our district, and we're really seeing some great gains before the shutdown. And so we are 100% remote right now. So we're in our second week of school and still working out some of the bugs, but we are very fortunate to be able to offer our teachers professional development all spring, all summer. And then we had 3 weeks before students came to school for our teachers to work together and collaborate across the district. And we also have, there is no live instruction on Wednesdays. So that's been a great opportunity to help support our teachers as they continue to collaborate with their teacher teams and teachers across the district in instructional planning and just all the various ways that we need to support our kids, whether it's remote learning or, just learning in general. So
Appreciate it. Sharif, what is it like in Philadelphia?
Yeah, so I'll start off where Jennifer left off. We are 100% remote, but there are conversations about revisiting it in between, Thanksgiving and the winter break. So we'll see. I have 3 school-age children at home now, and so just supporting them and doing some of the homeschooling things that my parents did for my younger siblings, like get chickens and have them raise chickens, so that's part of their homeschooling progress. My path to becoming an administrator, principal was, I kind of fought it tooth and nail. I was not interested in doing it. And I even recall, I had a very supportive principal, and I kept a napkin that he had written, Charles Delfonso. He wrote a note on a napkin once. We were at a series of trainings, and he wrote, "You'll make a great principal one day." And I saved it, even though I was like, that's not what I want to do. I enjoyed being in the classroom. I felt like really, connected to the students and the community. And, across 26 years, I've only been in 3 schools, and the last 2 as a principal were both turnaround schools. But I remember when he said, like, hey, they are starting a cohort to train teacher leaders to become administrators, to become principals and get your principal certification. And I didn't go to the meeting. I was like, and he asked me why the next day. I said, well, I was tutoring kids, so I couldn't go. But he said, well, there's another meeting next week where, they had a series of meetings to get people interested to start this cohort. And, in the back of my head, I was like, I'm not going to that. Well, Chuck Delfonso showed up on the day that the next meeting was. And I was in my classroom tutoring kids. He's like, hey, why don't you go to me and I'll finish tutoring them. And so then I felt like put on the spot. He's right there in the classroom. The kids are like, oh, that'll be cool. The principal, you go, And so I went and I think from there I did sign up to be part of the cohort. He even pulled some strings and got the meetings, the classes to be in our library in our school. So I really had no excuses but to go down the hallway, get certified. But even then I said, like, I'll have this certification, but wouldn't necessarily pull me out of the classroom. But something interesting happened. Our assistant principal ended up going to a high school. We were a middle school. And the staff, one by one started asking me to fill the role. And the principal did as well. We had a new principal at this point. And once she asked as well, I felt like compelled, and I had been there for 9 years as well. And so I felt like this was, I had a deep connection with the community, and this was an area of need. And so I stepped in to be the assistant principal and did that for a year, and then a school down the street that had, just a ton of issues and challenges. I accepted to become the principal there after saying, no, I'm going to stay at Turner Middle School forever. At that point, it was 10 years, but ended up accepting, and I was the third principal in 6 months, and which tells you like some of the challenges that were there. And I stayed 5.5 years. I loved it. So, that was my path to administration.
And similar to Jennifer, she's in a system taken over by the state. You've worked at 2 schools turnaround. And I'm sure Amanda's seen some of the similar parts. And that's worth mentioning because people who are watching or listening don't realize just how tough you often walk into situations already fully baked.
Oh, yeah.
And they want you to work with it. So thanks for sharing that part. Lindsey, what's your pathway?
Well, so as cheesy as it sounds, I didn't choose this. It kind of chose me. I had a very supportive superintendent. I've been in my current at Dwight Township High School for the past 12 years and have loved everything about, I have the autonomy and the flexibility to do what I want in my classroom, and have just always felt very supported at DTHS. And after Teacher of the Year and after 2 years of speaking and doing some coaching and kind of growing into this teacher leadership journey, this role, I was starting to feel the pressure to leave my classroom, and that happened. That sometimes it's right for people and sometimes it isn't. But I was really conflicted, and I think that's a real tragedy in our profession. That oftentimes, in order to experience any kind of career advancement, teachers are forced to leave. And granted, the situation in my building, we're a very small rural school, but my superintendent was very aware of the fact that I was feeling this pressure to make some decision. And ultimately, he came to me and said they were restructuring some administration positions. And he came and he said, "You're ready." He said, "You're ready. I really think it's time." And I said, "I'm not ready. I don't think I'm ready." He said, "You're ready to lead. You're ready to coach." I said, "That might be, but I'm not ready to lead my classroom just yet." And so I'm so grateful that I have a superintendent who said, "What does your dream job look like? Let's start there." And I said, "Well, it doesn't exist." I said it would be part-time in my classroom teaching seniors in English 4 and 12th graders. And I said, and then the other half of the day, I would be coaching the most vulnerable population of our staff and working with them and working with teachers and talking curriculum and planning professional development. And my superintendent said, "I think we can make this work." And after some restructuring and after a very supportive Board of Education meeting, they made it happen. And so again, I'm still very new to this role, but I'm just loving that there is time built into my day to work with new teachers and with the most vulnerable population of our teaching profession. And so it really is right now my dream job. And for the longest time, my mentors, Pam Riley and Steve also would always say, "What are you feeling pulled to do and what are you feeling pushed to do?" And I was feeling pushed to do a lot of things, but I was feeling pulled into teacher leadership within my district, but the position just didn't exist. And so the fact that I had an administration and a supportive board who were willing to kind of create that space for me has been just one of the greatest joys of my life. So I'm very grateful. And that's my story.
Well, thanks for highlighting the importance of the superintendent in making decisions like this happen, because superintendents can play a big role one way or another, and you had a supportive one. So that's good to hear. Derek, what's your pathway story?
When you think about the education aspect, it's pretty traditional. Undergraduate in English with a 7 through 12 licensure, going on to get a master's, then an education specialist degree, and instructional leadership, and then finally a doctorate in educational leadership and policy. So that part was very traditional in the sense, but I did all of that work because I believe in lifelong learning and the growth mindset. I did that with no intention of leaving the English classroom. I did it because a colleague said, come on, let's go get our doctorate together. And I said, okay, sure. It was fun times. We learned a lot of stuff and did research, and I could talk to kids about it. Over the course of my 10 years, though, I've done a lot of work with the state in core coaching and training teachers across the state. And I had a great partner in that. And she had actually been a mentor for me when I was in college. She was a teacher in the same building that I'm in now. And I went and watched her teach, and she threw me out there, day one, go teach this lesson, just do this, and we'll talk about feedback after. And we coached together for about 3 years, and we would travel across the country, and she would say, one day when we have our own school. One day when we have our own school. Now, I thought that meant she was going to lead it and I was going to teach. And so she called me up one day and she said, okay, I'm the principal of your school. They just told me. And I have an assistant principal job. And I said, I can't do it. No, I'm going to keep teaching English and you be my boss and I will do whatever you say. And she said, let's talk for real. And we sat down and we had coffee. And she said, so what's your vision? So very simply, Lindsey, to you, it was the notion of, she said, what do you see this job looking like? And I said, I want to work with teachers and I want to work with students. And if it's about instruction, I'm all in. Instructional leadership is my heart. It's my passion to think about how do we start from where we are and grow every day to make sure that the level of work that's on desk for kids is on grade level, it's engaging, and it helps them see success. And she said, we can do that. You can do that. I'll make sure that you can do that. And I said, are you sure? I know what a principal really does. It's paperwork. I'm behind the desk. I'm looking at data all day. And I love data. Don't get me wrong. But I want to be in the classroom and be hands-on with teachers and co-teach and get to talk about and debrief afterwards. She said, if you sign, you can do it. And so I'm in year 2 of doing that, and it has been amazing. So it was started with a conversation, I guess, and a dream of, I didn't think it would be a public school we'd be running, but I love that even more because that's where I grew up and that's the school I've worked in my entire life. And so it's super exciting to work in this Title I school that, as a lot of you all have shared, was, on the state bad list, if you want to call it that. And we went to a 2-time reward school, and to see that progression of how instruction and relationships are the 2 key factors that change a school's trajectory. So how do we marry the 2, that they're not in isolation, that we think about kids' social emotional needs, as well as the work that's on the desk, and that it aligns to standards and the expectations that we want for all students.
That's a great story. And it also points to the importance of having good peers and peer influence. You had a friend who say, hey, let's go get a doctorate. I got friends who say, hey, let's go get drunk. So very, very different piece. So Jeff, what's your pathway story?
It's hard to talk about my pathway and not pull from some of the stories that everybody else is pulling from. One of the things I heard everybody talk about is just straight up their passion for kids, their passion for education. I think my story is just only a slight variation thereof. I grew up with an amazing blessing that's been kind of a problem my whole life, and that's that my parents taught me that I can do anything. Right? It's such an incredible blessing that my parents taught me that I was raised in that, and it's also a bit of a problem because I've said yes to a whole lot of things because of it, because I had this feeling that I could do a lot. But actually, that's the reason why I teach, is that growing up, I saw so many of my classmates and other people not believe that they could do everything, or that they could do anything they wanted to. So I started out teaching science, high school science. My degree was in biology. And if you know a small school, that means that I taught chemistry, physics, engineering, and robotics, right? Because the degree was in bio. So I take on these roles because I can, right? Because I believe in myself. I would have students come into my classroom saying, I can't. See, the hardest thing that I ever taught had nothing to do with the science and had everything to do with a belief in themselves and their own abilities. And what I realized is that kids were thirsty for that. They were thirsty for a belief in themselves. So I'm making my classes harder and harder and harder and harder. And next thing you know, I ended up teaching every single one of my courses for college credit in dual credit agreements, despite the fact that I did not have a PhD or even a master's degree in the subject area. I was able to convince the colleges that no, my kids can outperform your college students on your chemistry finals, so they deserve credit for it. So this goes on and on. And I start believing so much that what is right for kids is what's most important. And I stopped seeing things like the fact that you probably shouldn't call your superintendent on their personal cell phone at 7 o'clock at night. You know, I didn't realize why that would be a bad idea, right? I would just blur all of those borders and start limiting the pyramids. And so what happened pretty early on is in my 5th year of teaching, I skipped a meeting and I ended up becoming the union president of the district because, of course, if you don't go to, you know, new folks, new teachers out there, never skip a meeting, you'll become in charge of things, right? So relatively small school district. We only got about 1,300 students in our entire district. So next thing you know, 5th year in, I'm union president. And that just kept me on this trajectory of asking more questions and not stopping asking why, right? When we were faced with, oh, we can't do that, I would be the guy to say, well, why? And then somebody would always spout off something about the state does this or the state does that. And I said, well, why? Right. And I would go and track that down. And next thing you know, you start getting into this spot where you can start making some really big changes for a school district. So really big changes for the trajectory for a lot of people by just simply not giving up and being a little bit tenacious with things. So of course, by the time I get to year 15 or so, my superintendent comes to me and says, hey, you really need to do this stuff. And I said, there's no way I'm going to become an administrator. So here I am, just like everybody else. It was definitely one of the hardest days of my life was that last day of school, just over 2 years ago. This is my 3rd year as administrator. I'm not going to get too emotional right now on the spot, but I'll tell you, I haven't cried a whole lot of times in my life. I bawled my head off that last day leaving that classroom because teaching is an identity. But what I have realized and what I've come to push myself for is to understand that a good classroom, any teacher who really excels at what they do, they realize that the teacher has no control over the classroom whatsoever. It's the kids who are in charge. And we're there to navigate, we're there to guide them, and we're there to get them onto the right path. And a good principal, I believe, understands that the principal's not in charge of the building either. The teachers and the students are in charge of the building. So if we can eliminate that leadership pyramid, instead start creating actual teams of educators, then we're going to make real movements in education. So that's why I eventually decided to go ahead and give this thing a shot. And I got to be honest with you, empowering your teachers to believe in their own power as much as we want to get our students to believe in their own power, that's the key to administration. It's getting your teachers to believe in themselves just as much as you want your students to believe. If you do that, your school's going to be awesome. So we're trying to get there. We're trying to get there.
And you're speaking as someone who's leading the school that you attended. So you've really seen.
Absolutely. This is a school that I attended. Attended the high school. Right now we're in full distance learning. And like I said, I don't know when to not say yes. So I am the distance learning coordinator for the Zillah School District. In addition to being the principal of the middle school. So you know, I was in charge of setting up the schedules, getting the Schoology is, you know, the system we're using, all the rest of the acronyms are out there and the rest, you know, but it can be done. You know, we just have to decide to do it and give ourselves a little bit of permission to believe in ourselves.
Absolutely. All of you share the fact that you have a calling toward education and teaching. When it comes to leadership, for some, it was a voluntold. For others, it was, yes, I want to do this. And so many teachers right now are in a similar position. They love the classroom. They want to teach. But there aren't a lot of opportunities for teacher leadership positions within the classroom. If you want it, you've got to lead. How do we come up or reimagine how to keep teachers in the classroom where they can also be leaders, or to say, if you're going to leave, here are the steps you need to take in order to be an effective leader? And anyone can weigh in at any point on that.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, I think more instances that Lindsey is experiencing, you know, these hybrid roles, you know, one, I think teacher leadership is a redundant term. I think teachers are inherently leaders. And so, but the idea of giving them opportunities to demonstrate it, not only with students, but with their peers. If they're effective, why wouldn't you as a school leader want to help them replicate it? Give them opportunities to show other people. So many educators talk about being in silos and not being able to connect with their peers. Why not connect with peers about improving teaching and learning? Like, that's the best way to, push student outcomes forward. And there are too many secrets, right? Like, teacher moves that this teacher does, knows that is effective. And the students go to the next classroom and say, yo, why aren't you doing it like Mrs. So-and-so? Like, that helps us a lot, and they're like, oh, I didn't even know, right? And so given, kind of tearing the barriers down in order to do that and making sure that it's pervasive, like leadership is pervasive, right? They say the best leaders they're not looking to create more followers, they're looking to create more leaders. And that is the role, I think, of the school leadership position.
I think to kind of continue what Sharif just said, I couldn't agree more. Good leadership multiplies. And I think with teachers, similar to what Derek was saying, my doctorate, which I'm hopefully defending in the next month or two, my dissertation, but it's not in educational administration. Thank you, Sharif. It's in teaching and learning. So my path for myself was not the world of admin. And now that they've created this space for me to kind of dip my toe in the water, I'm loving the fact that I have time built into my day to help support new teachers, novice teachers in our district. But if someone had not said to me, hey, you're ready, I never would have considered that for myself. So I think that's very telling. I also think too, teachers are constantly pushing the boundaries of what a 24-hour day can hold, and we're selfless and we just want to be on all the time and be the best we can for other people's children. So I think creating spaces within similar to everything that Jeff said, yes, even if teachers don't want to leave their classrooms and go into the world of admin, creating spaces where teachers can collaborate and really collaborate, not superficial, time to talk, but like organic, authentic time built into their week to collaborate and triage and talk about what's working and what isn't working. I think everything Jeff said about empowering our teachers to be collaborative and to be the leaders that they are, I couldn't agree more.
I'll just add, I'll say, one thing I see a lot of counties doing, mine included, is a teacher leadership academy. So we're helping teachers identify these skills that they have. A lot of my teachers, my really good teachers, are so humble that they're like, oh, I can't lead, I'm not good enough. And I'm like, yeah, you are. So we nominate the teachers, and they can also nominate themselves, and it's based off of an application. And then we have a year-long program where they're learning different skills. They're learning how to have those crucial conversations that are really hard for leaders to have, especially with their peers. They're learning about different strategies, different policies. And so we're basically grooming them to have the confidence to want to be able to lead. And the second thing is kind of what Lindsey was saying, is having those professional learning communities, which is what we have. We have PLCs, which every week we have someone that's leading. And it's kind of like what Jeff was saying. These teachers have the autonomy and the control to lead their own meetings. And so when we go and observe, we're literally a fly on the wall, because they have everything under control. They're looking at their data. They're determining what they're doing. They're in complete control of what they're doing. So in essence, they are this teacher leader. With our Teacher Leadership Academy, though, we are making it where we're providing them a stipend depending on what they do. So it allows them to have that control to determine, how do I want to take these skills and share them with others? And then they're able to log that and go from there. So I think having a very intentional program that supports these teachers to become leaders is what we need to do. And I think we need to incentivize it in some way, because they do X amount all day long. And to ask more of them, I feel like they should have some type of incentive to want to do that besides just helping others. So those two things I see have really been helpful in our leadership amongst our county.
Thank you.
You know, I completely agree. Having an intentional program to help our teachers hone and refine their skills in leadership is definitely something we need right now. But I'd like to talk about the long-term goal. And this is going to sound a little bit interesting. So hang with me for just half a second, is that you have to understand that I'm a huge proponent of teacher leadership, huge proponent of it. National conferences, you know, all the rest, written about it. Teacher leadership is tremendously important. My goal, though, is that we stop using the words. My goal is that we stop talking about teacher leadership eventually, because teacher leadership actually denotes that there's a divide between administration and teachers, and there should not be. It should not be an us versus them, a this or a that. The goal needs to be that the leadership is distributed. A principal is a member of the team, and that team is able to come together and make decisions and make those decisions based off of what's actually best for students in the time, whether that's in a PLC process, whether that's whatever acronym you want to use. But the goal is ultimately to get rid of the terminology of teacher leadership and instead just simply empower the teachers to make the decisions when they need to. I've seen a lot of great movements with that. I've seen a lot of districts make some big changes. There are going to be some folks that are going to be watching this saying, you know, I just don't see that in my size of district. To be fair and be blunt, I'm in a small district. It's a little bit easier for us to accomplish some of these things, where in larger districts, maybe you need some differences. So I would love to hear from somebody who's maybe in a bigger district about what the specific struggles are there, when, you know, I'm talking of a staff, you know, across the whole district of 150 people. 150 people, that I mean, that's across the district, right, for our staff. So that's a department, you know, for some folks. So thoughts from others.
Thanks.
Well, I really find that interesting, Jeff, because one of the things that I am very concerned about, and I'd like to know specifically from others who work in urban districts, but the worse our data gets, the less autonomy our teachers have, right? So when you are a struggling school district, and we all know the barriers that poverty presents, it seems like there are more and more and more mandates, right? More things trying to fix the teachers, fix the students, to ultimately fix the schools and fix the data. And so that's something that I have, that I worry a lot about, and I have a lot of concerns as we continue to bring in more programs and bring in more outsiders. And you have this, you always have this outside view of what's happening in the district, which, you know, we have to own some of that. Our school has been failing students, right? Our data shows that our students are not performing at grade level. And there are all kinds of causes for that and no excuses. And so I worry about that. And I don't know if it's the same in other large urban districts or districts with failing data. But you see a lot of teacher burnout. You see a lot of teachers becoming frustrated. And then I think it was Jeff that mentioned that, you know, there is no divide between teachers and administrators. But what happens when you when you work in a district with that divide, or with lack of autonomy, that divide just grows and grows and grows. And so you have this lack of distrust. And, you know, it's been interesting for me because I am in the district where I taught for many years, and now as a leader. And so constantly worrying about how to support our teachers and help them to grow in their leadership skills. But it's fighting against all of the initiatives that are either our district has put in place or the state has put in place, or, you know, so constantly trying to think of ways to circumvent that and continue to support and empower our teachers despite all of the things that are preventing those barriers.
Thank you. And I'll come back to a point you mentioned in a little while. Derek?
I think for us, it's very similar that a lot of people have shared, but in our district, we have a principal academy. And so teachers enter that academy in preparation for going into leadership. So that's one initiative that's going on that's really been a great success. And teachers have just felt empowered by it as well. Being able to get in there and ask tough questions. What does it look like when this comes across your desk? What does this look like on a daily basis? So before you dive in and get your feet wet, you have the opportunity to meet with 10 different principals throughout the year and over the course and go through some really specific things that you didn't get in your leadership classes. So that's been really helpful. We also have a professional learning network of teachers. So across the district, they are paid a stipend, and they come back and they lead teachers, because that's what teachers do anyway, right? Like, we don't need a title for it, as Jeff said, but it is nice to have a stipend for it. And so having that process play out in the district where they then get to go and be their own professional community to learn and grow and then bring that back. For us in the building, everything is run through committees. It is the distributive leadership process. Never a decision is made just from the front office. And then just because of the experiences that I've been blessed to have through being Teacher of the Year and getting to work with the State Department of Ed in Tennessee, I'm always plugging out to teachers on a Friday focus is what it's called, or a Friday follow-up. And it's just, here are the articles, here are the options for you. If you're looking for networking, if you're looking to be able to apply for a released item or a test thing, just how did we get the word out there? So many teachers said to me, well, how did you know about this? Well, how did you know about this opportunity for leadership outside of the building? Which made me start asking the question, you know, it's about leadership, but it's also about professionalism. I want to grow in this profession. We all feel a calling to education. We feel like this is our passion and our wheelhouse. So how do we get that word out for teachers to be able to say, I want to apply to do that with the U.S. Department of Ed, or I want to be able to do that with the State Department, or we now have right now 6 teachers who are on a curriculum committee working with the state. One teacher is working as a state collaborative on reforming education. So she's coming in and out of the school doing policy work with our legislature. And so how do we change what school looks like, right? Like, our teachers aren't just at the table in the building, but how do we get their voices out there in the state and across the country? And so we keep trying to think about new ways to do that in inventive ways.
When you are a superintendent or school board member, the A word that means a lot is allocation. When you're a teacher, the A word that matters a lot is accountability. When you're a leader, and this is one that Jennifer mentioned, it's autonomy. And I'm interested in knowing, how much autonomy do you have as principals or as leaders? Can you hire your teachers at your individual school site, or do they come through from central office? How much can you sign off for a check before you have to go to the school board? And I raise this in part because many people I talk to think principals have all the autonomy that they want. And just by the laughter and the head shaking, we know that's not the case. Talk to me about autonomy, because that matters a lot to leadership.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought that up. You know, I think, you know, and I'm always, I think autonomy is kind of like Spider-Man father or uncle used to say, right? Like, with great power comes great responsibility. And, you know, whatever role you play in the educational ecosystem, like, you know, there's a whole lot of ineffective people who want a whole lot of autonomy. And I think that's really dangerous, and it leads to negative student outcomes. We see it if we just go down the traditional path. If teachers, new teachers, when they're surveyed, they say, oh, I don't feel prepared to teach. And then, but that weekend, they'll also say, hey, I want more autonomy. Well, you already said you're not prepared. And I think principals fall into that same trap sometimes. And that's why I think, like, just leadership development and mentorship is so important. Like, I think, you know, in schools, leadership is underestimated. Like, just the power of it, the complexities of the roles, all of that. When I first became principal, like, you know, I did not have the autonomy to choose my staff. And I remember because I was in the school, it was a turnaround school, and it was a hard to staff. It was middle school, so it was always hard to staff. I don't understand why people didn't want to work with middle school students. But you know, eventually the board said, like, hey, if you're in this profile school, you can choose your employees with your leadership team. That was a game changer for us. And again, it wasn't me just sitting in my office saying, oh, this person, that person. The team, the leadership team is what decided, like, hey, here's what we value. Here's what our community has said. And this is the profile of effective educator that we're looking for. And it was a game changer. And we went from, you know, a school that was, you know, ranked as the poorest performing school to one of the best, if not the best, middle school in the district. And I think, but we had that, you know, certain levels of autonomy, and we proved that we could do this, and then people let go even more. And you know, over the course of 16 years, you know, that's something that I and I didn't just want personal autonomy. I wanted the autonomy to lead and serve and support my leadership team. And that trickled down, to effective. The more effective you are, the more autonomy that you deserve. But we should also just be careful, about what that means and how it's implemented. Because some people say, "Oh, autonomy," because that means they don't have to be accountable, for your success. You're like, "Oh, you did it. Well, why'd you do that?" Right? So we just got to be, strategic about it and use it as a lever where it doesn't become problematic.
Thanks.
If I can follow up, that word accountability, I think sometimes it gets a negative connotation. And as teachers, we're never going to escape accountability, and we shouldn't, right? I mean, we should be held accountable. But I think in our profession, we spend so much time talking about, well, how do we get rid of these bad teachers? And not nearly enough time talking about how do we create support systems within our districts that cultivate these roles where we are supporting novice teachers, where we're supporting new teachers to help them grow into the teachers that they have the capacity to become, right? And so I think as administrators and as leaders in our building, we need to be really conscientious and really intentional about creating, as Sharif said, those mentoring programs and those spaces where teachers have the support systems to grow into the teachers that they are capable of becoming. And that's something that I'm really passionate about with my new role is authentic and meaningful coaching and mentoring, and safe spaces where teachers can come and grow,
Thank you.
I think also to follow up on what Sharif and Lindsey were saying is that just like we have to grow our teachers, and teachers are lifelong learners and always growing, we have to grow our principals as well. I think there's a misnomer that you get your administrative degree, you're certified by the state, and you're ready to go. And we throw you into a building and we say, good luck, right? But principals need mentors as well. Principals need learning opportunities and growing opportunities and professional development. And one of the things that we're seeing in our district is that just as I mentioned, our teachers don't have a lot of autonomy based on all of the initiatives and all of the directives that come, being a failing school. Our principals do not have a lot of autonomy. Now, when I was a new building principal, I didn't really notice it that much because I was just trying to survive my first year as a building principal. And then once I got a little more experience, started to really take note of that. But one of the great things about our new school leader is that he really does believe in principal autonomy, right? And that principals are the true leaders of their building. And so this is his second year in the role of CEO or leader of our school district. And he's really struggling because it comes down to culture. If autonomy is not part of your culture, you just can't say, okay, now go be autonomous, which is what has kind of happened. So when he was new in the district, he would expect our building leaders to take on this responsibility or to make this decision. But they, through our school culture, had been trained not to make decisions they didn't have all the tools they needed to effectively lead without someone having that oversight over them or kind of giving them those specific directions. And so he really had to take a step back and think about the issues that he was seeing and some of the struggles that our building leaders were having. And so, he's really been committed to providing them professional development and supports and mentors. They all have a mentor now, which is wonderful. And it's not the person who evaluates them, right? Because that was something that was happening as well. And so I think it's a great commitment because everyone needs to grow, no matter your role, no matter your title, no matter how much schooling you have. And so I think that's really important as we have to teach, we have to make sure that everyone has those skills in order to have that autonomy.
Thank you.
When I think about autonomy, I think that autonomy and sometimes power sometimes go kind of hand in hand a little bit, and I think that there's a lot of times that we all underestimate the amount of power, influence, or autonomy that we could have if we wanted to. I know it's kind of funny, but kindergartners, they have way more autonomy and way more power than they realize most of the time. If they wanted to overthrow a classroom, group of kindergartners, they could. I mean, there's like 25, 26 of them. There's no way a teacher's going to control them. They're fast, they're mean, they're sticky, right? I mean, they have that power.
Look,
And
Jeff,
teachers,
I almost didn't teach because of kindergarten. I subbed at the kindergarten classroom. I said, Mom, this ain't for me. She said, maybe it's not the right grade. Thank God she told me that, because I was about to exit left and never look back.
That is the most powerful teacher. I'll tell you what, out of all the teachers out there, we're talking our pre-Ks, our kinders, our ones, those teachers just do it phenomenal work. I'm not entirely sure how they get it done. But in reality, those kids have a lot of power and a lot of autonomy. There's a lot of things that the teacher will say you can't do, and then the kid will say, well, watch me, right? Teachers, I believe, have much more autonomy and much more power than sometimes they are led to believe, and sometimes don't utilize all of the autonomy that is actually available to them. And I think much the same way with principals. Now, I do not deny the fact that I am given a budget and I have to stay within that budget. And I will also not deny the fact that it's easier for me to apologize after going over budget than it is for me to get permission to spend over budget. And so sometimes I'll get, slapped on the wrist or whatever. But in reality, we just got to push the envelope a little bit on it. Now, it's way easier said than done. And I know that there's a bunch of barriers out there. But at the end of the day, I have never come across in my small district, I've never come across somebody who had a great idea, who was passionate about that idea and wasn't willing to do what it took to make that initiative happen. And I think that if you look at any district, you're going to see examples of that across the board. Can it be really hard? Yes. That's why, I mean, you wouldn't believe it, but I'm like 22, right? But the gray hair comes in real fast.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, right. I tell you what, right? The gray hair comes. I need to find out how Sharif, it's all black up there. I don't know what happened down here, but the idea is, guys, this is hard work, and we are going to have some barriers, and we are going to have some things that we push back upon, but you really can control some of that autonomy. You really can. And so I would encourage teachers, administrators, superintendents. Superintendents will tell you that they don't have autonomy either over the county, the state, the educational service district, whatever your model is set up in, right? But you have more than you think you do, and we need to push on it.
Thank you.
I would agree with that. In our school district this year, all middle schools have the hybrid model, right? As a lot of people do, but it's the sense of the other four middle schools are doing in-person and virtual at the same time. So the teacher will have a computer in front of them with kids and then 20 kids in front of them as well. As someone who just left the classroom 2 years ago, I couldn't imagine what that looked like. So we pushed back, and our school decided that we would have sections. And so a teacher in first period will have kids in front of them. Their second period will be all virtual. So we created the sections so that way it would be more manageable, and also that someone wasn't getting the shaft. That the kids that were on the computer were getting the teacher's full attention, and the kids that were in person were getting the full attention. We got a lot of pushback on that because that's not what everyone else was doing. But we like you said, Jeff, we pushed forward and we said, we can make this happen. I promise we'll make it happen. And 2 weeks in, thank the Lord we did, because it's been the best so far. And it's really exciting to see what it looks like to have virtual learning taking place. And then you go to the next classroom and there's kids in desk and rows with masks on, learning the same algebra that they would be learning in the other class.
I'll just say, I agree a lot with Sharif in that I feel like autonomy in some respects is earned. I don't think we should automatically give someone that autonomy. I think about my children, my 8-year-old son, and we're trying to show him like math. I'm trying to show him how to multiply with algorithm style. He's like, Mom, I've got this. And so he does it wrong. And I get frustrated. And I'm like, dude, if you would have listened to me, I would have showed you how to do this. So I feel like he's not ready, and you have to kind of have that gradual release. And I think it's the same as with teachers and especially with leadership, because if we have poor leaders leading our building, it's a domino effect, and it just ruins the whole culture of the building. And so we really have to be careful with how much control we give them, because we know they're new. I'm still learning. It's my 4th year. I like having that support system, but now it's kind of scaffolded to where it's where I need it, I ask for it. Rather, before they used to just give it to me. So in my county, we have approximately 2,700 or so teachers. My school itself has 100 employees, and I have about 800 students. So being a leader of that, I want some support, and I've been given it through mentorships and all of that. But yes, we do hire our own people in our building, but we're given our allotments. So I don't just say, oh, I need another kindergarten teacher. I have that guidance that says you're allowed to hire someone. Now you choose who you want to hire. So it's a little bit of that. We have that autonomy, but it's kind of that guided autonomy. And then to answer Gerard's question about budgets, of course, we're giving a budget. I'm very much a rule follower. I always stay where I need to stay, but they allow us to choose how we want to buy it, as long as we're within the guidelines of where that money's coming from, of what we want to purchase, I mean. But we have that autonomy, but we still do have to go through just our central office personnel, like our professional development department, to make sure that we're not breaking any rules, make sure we're not, if it's Title II funding, then we need to make sure we're not getting flagged for doing something incorrectly. So I think the autonomy is there, but we also have those checks and balances. And then as you become more effective and more efficient with what you're doing, they eventually start scaffolding off some, and then taking that support you were given, they're now giving it to someone else. And I feel like that's kind of how it needs to be in every situation. Even if it's teaching kids, if it's teachers teaching teachers, or us with teachers, I feel like we have to make sure that you're ready for that, and then say you're ready. Just kind of like how Lindsey was saying. I mean, her administrators were like, you're ready, go. And they're still going to mentor her, but they already know she's ready, and then they're going to start looking at her as a leader, and eventually she won't need as much as she needed, and they're probably going to give her more responsibilities and say, we know you've got this, you have the autonomy to decide how you want to do it. So I just feel like we have to, kind of like what Sharif was saying, we kind of have to have it where you have autonomy once you're ready for it, because it's a lot of responsibility to have those decisions on your shoulders if you're not ready for that.
Thank you. So as we end, I want you to do one thing for the administrators in particular, but everyone who's listening. What book would you recommend that leaders read when they need encouragement? And I'll go in the opposite direction. Derek, we'll start off with you.
For me, it would be the book, The Way of the Shepherd. It's a leadership book, and this guy, and he tells a quick story about two different shepherds, and he's talking about his sheep, and one guy's field looks really rough and the other one looks really good. They both get the same outcome, but he says, why does your pasture and your sheep look this way? And he said, because I love the sheep. And so I think just coming back to why we do this job, and because of the love of people and the love of students. And so it's a good reminder. Thank you, Derek. Jennifer.
I would say The Art of Coaching by Elena Aguilar. And I say that because a lot of our administrators, really need that professional development in instructional leadership and how to coach their teachers and how to help grow their teachers. And so it's just one of my favorite books for sharing strategies that are inspirational but yet practical in helping to coach and lead.
Okay. We'll go to my friend Illinois. Lindsey, what do you think? What's your book?
So my book is actually, and I swear this is not a plug, I'm going to start with the original, the Flip the System, because, and I believe the original wasn't the Australian version, but it encourages us to challenge the status quo and to rethink the hierarchies that exist within education. I think too often we're too accepting of, well, this is how things are, and instead of imagining how they could be, right? And so I have to, for Michael Saskell, my buddy, there's a new US version coming out, Flip the System, how teachers can flip the system and save democracy. I contributed a chapter on rural equity, but the whole point being that if we constantly look at things as how they've always been, we're less inclined to question how they could be. So Flip the System really changed my perspective about what schools can look like and what they should look like. And so any version of that.
Thanks, Lindsey. Amanda.
Mine is The Energy Bus by John Gordon. Really anything by John Gordon. One, it's short, so I know a lot of teachers don't have time. Two, I just think when you get down to everything we talked about, it's about culture, it's about positivity, and how to take it's perspective. So if you're going to lead a building, you need to do it and be happy and enjoy it and find the positive, because our teachers are going through so much and it's hard for them to see it. So we've got to spread the mud, clean it up, and figure out where the positive is and remind them that we're here for the kids. And so that book is very succinct, and it just gives you 10 ways to really remember and to implement a way of seeing things with a positive lens so that we can lead with that positivity and help to bring everyone up. Because once we build those relationships and have that climate, everything else will fall into place. But if people don't want to be at school, if they don't want to be at work, it's going to be a hard place to turn around. And I know Sharif, definitely with having the turnaround schools, I just feel like climate's everything. And if we can't get our teachers to want to be there, then we have a lot of work to do. And that's just a really good book that talks about those strategies you can use.
Thanks, Amanda. And also thank you. And who else would have been? It would have been Jennifer, who mentioned the word culture. And given the fact that it's a part of what we do at our institute, glad to hear that mentioned. Let's go over to you, Jeff, your book.
So I promise I'm not trying to be a brown noser, but because I'm going to say the culture code, right? Would be the next one. I was just trying to throw the culture in there, but
sure.
You know, I gotta be honest. Culture code is one I just read just a couple days ago. I read a ton of different ones. You know, we obviously do a lot about growth mindset. You know, all of that. Realistically, one of my favorite books, read The Martian. If you haven't read The Martian yet, that's kind of the situation that you're put in the schools. Sometimes you get into a situation and you're in trouble, right? And you got to figure out a way to make things work and get things going. But if I'm going to stretch my autonomy here a little bit, my real answer is write your own. Okay. As an administrator, if you're going to do this, I want you to write a book that is your school. What is the story? What is the narrative that you want to create in your school? You know, many times people talk about this. They'll say, you know, write your headline. You know, 5 years from now, what's the headline about your school? But realistically, it's not about reading about somebody else's vision for what culture looks like in your school. It's not about reading somebody else's vision for what discipline looks like. It's about figuring out what your vision is. So take the time, sit down, bullet point it out, use charts, however you want to do it, but make your vision onto a piece of paper. And that's going to give you way more professional development than any of the rest of the books are, even though I do still read them.
Thanks so much, Jeff. Sharif.
Yeah, you know, I think you know, one of my favorites is The Advantage. Peter, I think Lindsey, he also wrote 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, and you know, while it talks about culture, it you know, my main takeaway is around teams. You know, like principals often think that they're alone, but they should have a viable, strong leadership team. You know, with folks that are, yes, being developed, that it may be new, but that could also fill in for them, you know, if need be. And I think this idea of situational leadership, like, you know, making sure that people get what they need, that they have that there's a defined, as Jeff said, that there's a defined competencies of leadership. You know, right now at the organization we run, that's what we're doing. We're providing support to principals as well as teachers. And then center around the competencies, like what will make leadership more effective. So this combination of servant leadership and situational leadership is just, I think, you know, such an important aspect of school leadership. And so I appreciate The Advantage because it dives into you know, what effective teams do, and ultimately a principal is going to be as effective as their team.
Thank you, Sharif. The one book that I often recommend to leaders isn't even one in the field of education. It's called The Secret Life of Plants by Peter Tompkins. And there's a section in there focused on Dr. George Washington Carver. And leadership is so much about nourishing, but it's also a lot about wonder. And as we become adults, we forget how to wonder. And so oftentimes that's a book I go to just when I want to wonder, because we're in the business of creating miracles, but sometimes we need to be grounded as well. And so with that, I want to thank all of you for sharing your thoughts, your ideas, your aspirations, and your challenges with all of us. I want to thank you for your commitment to education, and I'll make sure I won't use teacher leadership again. I'll make sure to watch my language. But more importantly, thank you for sharing yourselves. You could have chosen different careers, but your calling is education. You could have done something differently with leadership, but you decided to push the envelope and to think differently. And that's why I'm glad to have you as a part of our network. And more importantly, consider us at the Institute and at the Foundation partners in our work. Again, this is Gerard Robinson from In Character, Thank you for your time, and we'll be back again.